Now let's really talk about the end. That's what you've been hearing about for years from your teachers, your preachers, your environmentalist, your scientist, etc., who all have their ideas of when the end will come, how the end will come, and even what will happen after the end has come. And what is this end that they are referring to? First of all, the word end has quite a few meanings, which includes limits or boundaries, finish or close, and destruction or death. However, the end we're dealing with here is referring to the latter definition, which is to come to an end, to cease, to terminate, to close, to conclude, and this end could be the end of the world or end of the earth. Why do I say this? Because the word Earth is defined as the planet that we live on, terrestrial globe according to Webster's New 20th Century Unabridged Dictionary, and it defines the word world as literally meaning the age of man, from Anglo-Saxon origin ver, man, and yildo, an age. So when saying the end of the world, you are saying the end of man, because the word world originally meant the existence of man on Earth. Yet, when scientists use the term end of the world, they mean the actual destruction of the planet, and they went as far as exploring other planets that can be inhabited by humans, such as Mars and the Moon, which have already shown signs of life existing on them, something that I've been telling you for years. They have set up bases on these planets, and there are pictures, books, Is There a Base on Mars?, videos, Alternative 3, and documented evidence that are now being released to the public which proves this, which is good, because I find that it's easier for you to accept it. What the public doesn't know is that scientists have been probing Mars since the 1800s and found conditions similar to that of this planet. In an article entitled There is Life on Mars, taken from the winter issue UFO Universe, it states that NASA photos that accompany this article shows that giant pipes rise high above the Martian surface, in some instances protruding from plains and deserts, in others from mountain sides. These pipes resemble vents pipes found on most Earth homes which use indoor plumbing. The plumbing would work poorly, if at all, without the venting the pipes provide. Such pipes on Mars might be used for air or other gas exchange and pressure equalization between an underground city and the surface atmosphere. And anyone who is familiar with accounts emphasized through any type of media, know that by the time news like this is made public, you can be sure that they have already visited and thoroughly dissected that planet, and that they have, and are still in the process of moving select people there. So what these scientists and environmentalists know about the destruction of this planet is not based on religion or a religious standpoint, it has to do with facts. And the fact is that the destruction of this planet is inevitable, and they are on their way out of here. You, on the other hand, are waiting for someone to come and save you, and it just might be too late at the rate this planet is going. The planet Earth is falling apart right under your feet. If you listen to the world news report, there is a catastrophe or disaster happening in some country, every single day, warning you that a great calamity is about to happen, because the condition of this planet has gotten to the point that even Mother Nature is tired of man. The first signs will be the animals and birds turning on mankind. When you see that, know it is near. The truth of the matter is, in order for Mother Earth to accommodate the luxuries of man, the pollutants from cars, planes, jets, factories, etc., all of life's natural substances are being destroyed. One in particular is the ozone layer, the shield that protects Earth from the sun's dangerous ultraviolet rays, is depleting, which in turn throws off the natural balance of the universe. And that's just one aspect of its destruction. There's violence, nuclear war, bombs, poverty, chemical waste, etc., that are all attributing to its destruction. So something has to go, either you or the planet. This type of information is never taught to you by your religious leaders, preachers, imams and rabbis, who give you their interpretation of the end of the world and base its cause on the prediction of the scriptures that was inevitable to come, regardless of the part man played by way of his selfishness and greed. Religion itself has made a major contribution to the destruction of this planet. If you were to scratch all aggressive tribalism, or nationalism, you usually find beneath its surface a religious core, some older binding energy or belief or superstition. This paradox of God love as a life force, the deepest well of compassion, is capable of transforming itself into a death force with destructive energies of belief. Faith, the sweetest refuge and consolation, is hardened into a sword, a club, a torch, a gun, or even a bomb. Religious hatreds tend to be merciless, which is now on view among the Hindus and Muslims of India, among the Islamic fundamentalist of Egypt or Algeria, and among Orthodox, Bosnian Muslims, and Catholics. It was religion behind the killings in Waco, Texas with leader David Koresh. It was religion behind the massacres and brutal rapes in Bosnia, and it was religion behind the bombing of the World Trade Center. Overpopulation is also accredited to its end. Scientists thought that it would be possible to produce abundant supplies of food that would easily take care of 5 billion to 10 billion people. However, a vast majority of people have been added to the ranks of the poor, not the rich. There were 2.5 billion poor people in 1968 AD. Now, in 1995 AD, there are 4.2 billion. This amount of consumption is stripping the earth bare. The question is, where will the growth stop? Many countries are now in the process of trying to restrict births, or will nature have to step in and clean up the planet, allowing starvation and diseases like AIDS and other plagues to take its course? There cannot be an infinite population on a finite planet. If you are working against lowering the birth rate, then you're automatically working in favor of raising the death rate. And needless to say, Mother Nature will do her part. Your earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, etc. may be her way of retaliation in order to survive. Look at it this way. You just took everything that Mother Nature provided for everyone on this planet freely, bottled it up and sold it. For one, you took the land, chopped down the trees, pulled flowers and plants out of their natural environment, planted fruits and vegetables in climates where they're not naturally grown, and poured chemicals in the ground to speed up their size and growth, then packaged and sold them, like it was yours. And you wonder why there are earthquakes. Secondly, you took the fresh clean air, polluted it with cigarette smoke, toxic fumes from chemicals, and now you package fresh air and sell it. And you wonder why there's blizzards and tornadoes. And thirdly, you took the water and used it as a dumping site for garbage and chemical wastes. And now you package clean water and sell it, and you wonder why there are floods and droughts. And when I say you, I don't mean you personally, I'm talking about mortal man, Enocytes, as a whole, humanity. Another thing I'd like to bring to mind is, did you ever stop to think that all this mystical talk about the end could be as simple as someone, or some beings, with no religious concern at all, who were watching the mentality of the inhabitants of this planet, foresaw the destruction that was coming and was trying to warn you? Or it could be as simple as someone or some beings, with no concern for you, religious or otherwise, who are aiding in the destruction of this planet, and their only motive may be for their personal gain. You can't be sure, can you? Nevertheless, most religious God-fearing people wish for the end and have no idea what the end entails, or if it's the end of the entire planet or the end of its inhabitants. Yet, in view of the state of the world, it has also become a common thing for men, women and children to wish for the world to end. And they want it to end for various reasons which has nothing to do with religion at all. I'm saying this because you tend to think that the only reason this world is coming to an end is because it was prophesied in religious books, such as the Bible and the Quran. And every sect or denomination, be they 1. Anthroposophy, 2. Baha'ism, 3. Brahmanism, 4. Brahmoism, 5. Buddhism, 6. Christianity, 7. Confucianism, ethical culture, 9. Gnosticism, 10. Jimposophy, 11. Hinduism, 12. Jainism, 13. Judaism, 14. Lamaism, 15. Mahayanaism, 16. Mandaism, 17. Mohammedanism, 18. Muslimism, 19. Reincarnationism, 20. Sabianism, 21. Saivism, 22. Shintoism, 23. Sikhism, 24. Taoism, 25. Theosophy, 26. Vedanta, 27. Vedantism, 28. Wahhabism, 29. Yogism, 30. Zen Buddhism, 31. Zoroastrianism, 32. 5%, 33. Black Muslims, 34. Hebrew Israelite, 35. Black Jews, have their own interpretation of when and how the end will come. What any of these religions seem to overstand is that the destruction of this planet is based on facts. Religious scholars don't want to adhere to what scientists say about the creation or its destruction, and scientists feel the same way about religion. Yet, both may contribute to its missing links. Only in recent years, you might find some who are beginning to venture into each other's circles, and realize that there is some connection, as shown in the January 11, 1988 AD issue of Newsweek magazine in an article entitled The Search for Adam and Eve. When scientists claim to have found your common ancestor, an Ethiopian, who is a Nubian woman who lived 200,000 years ago and left resilient genes that are carried by all of mankind. So now, with all this in mind, let's open-mindedly talk about the end based on facts. And one is, that there are some people who don't want the world to end because they feel that this is their paradise, and they will fight against anything that will interfere with it, like animal activists and environmental preservationists. In order for them to have acres of open land and large beautiful mansions, how many trees, that aid in the replenishing of the earth, have to be destroyed? Hundreds can be, and sometimes for only one person's pleasure. What most people don't know is that trees are of extreme importance in soil stabilization and erosion. They also protect and conserve water supplies and prevent floods and droughts. Trees provide food and shelter, homes and food for animals, and also purify the atmosphere by absorbing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. So these people with mansions have no need for organizations such as the Environmental Protection Agency, and will strip the earth of each and every delicacy that they can get from it as long as it's available and they can afford it, so they think. Then, On the other hand, there are children growing up that want the world to end because they feel unwanted, unloved, and see that there is no future, so they end their own world by committing suicide, and this is happening more and more each year. They are in the street creating a street life of death. Adults who can't stand what's happening to their children, with drugs, gangs, sex and violence, murder them to end their world. And the elderly who want the world to end just for a little peace in a world full of chaos and turmoil, so they end it by simply stop living and will themselves to die. And now, according to the October 6, 1994 AD issue of the Atlanta Journal, new groups have developed referred to as Doomsday thinkers. They depict the world as a threat and oftentimes result in what they call revolutionary suicide or mass murder. Also, the righteous and God-fearing want the world to end for the same reasons, but they choose to say that this end signifies the time of the return of the Messiah Jesus. All of these people, be they scientist, environmentalist, leader, parent, or child, believes that this end will relieve them from the trials and tribulation of this life, the same way your grandmother felt who has been waiting, for her grandmother who is waiting, for her grandmother, all the way back for millions and millions of people from centuries past who died waiting for the end. And now you're waiting. But what exactly are you waiting for? In fact, just what do you think the end is? Are you prepared for it? What will you do when it comes? This is why I am writing this pamphlet, so that you and one can really talk about the end. Then you will understand just what the end is and what it entails. And not just sit around waiting, when it's things that you can be doing. The end of the world has purposely found its basis in your Bible as stories, in your novels as fiction, and in the predictions such as 1. John Wesley said the end would come in 1836 AD. The Baptists proposed 1830 AD and 1847 AD. 2. Based on the text of Daniel 8:14, a New England farmer named William Miller expected the world to end in 1843 AD or 1844 AD. His followers pinpointed October 22, 1844 AD, unwilling to accept the great disappointment that resulted when October 22, 1844 AD passed without Christ's return. Some explain that Christ began to cleanse the heavenly sanctuary on that date, thus gave birth to the modem Adventist movement. 3. Charles Tazel Russell, whose public Bible studies formed the foundation of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, said Christ had returned to earth in 1874 AD and would begin his visible reign in 1914 AD. Jehovah's Witness literature now speaks of the Creator's promise of peaceful and secure new world before the generation that saw the events of 1914 AD passes away, again in 1916 AD and 1918 AD, each time stating the word came from the Creator whom he called Jehovah. 4. Contemporary failed speculations include Edgar C. Weisnant, who in 1988 AD listed 88 reasons why the rapture will be in 1988 AD. When Christ failed to return, he predicted the rapture of 1989 AD. A Georgia book that placed the rapture on October 1992 AD, at 12:55 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and a Korean prophet's assertion that the rapture was set for midnight, October 28, 1992 AD, in South Korea. 20,000 Christians left school or quit jobs to await the end. The makers of these predictions are of several varieties. They are religious prophets of warning, mystic prophets, seers who seem to dream unintentionally of future events without living to see their prophecies fulfilled. Then there are the scientific interpreters of trends and likely possibilities of doom who frequently indicate, supported by the evidence of astronomy, geology, meteorology, and even economics, an even more complete destruction than many of the prophetic visions from the past. The scientific prophets of today foresee the devastating and eventual destruction of the earth through uncontrolled industrialization, general famine, resulting from overpopulation and food distribution breakdown, disastrous climatic variation and flooding through the hothouse effect, to excessive carbon dioxide in the upper atmospheric layers, and the poisoning of the oceans and the destruction of the sea's ability to renew life. These are things that the Bible never mentions, as well as droughts, blizzards, forest fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, volcano eruptions, ozone depletion, etc. And these prophetic misfires destroys the trust of innocent minds who are looking for answers. The end of the world is the end of all life on the planet Earth, meaning men, women, children, animals, plants, fish, fowl, etc., as in the time of Noah of the Bible, Genesis 6:13. However, this end could also lead to the end of the earth, bringing it back to the Ice Age. There are basically two views of the end: the Bible's point of view, which only deals with someone coming to save you, and the scientific point of view, which deals with cause and effect. This is what caused it, and these are the effects. Neither knows how and when the end will come. That would be determined on man, nature, and or the universe. However, the fact still remains that the end is inevitable. The Bible, Old and New Testaments, and the Quran doesn't tell you about all the other things going on around you, like the natural disasters. They also never tell you about extraterrestrial involvement, which is mentioned all throughout the Bible. For example, in the Old Testament when it says that God came down in Genesis 11:5, and I quote, "And the Lord, Yahweh, came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men built." Now does it really make sense to you that the Almighty, all-seeing, all-knowing God would come down to see a small city, when He created universes? How belittling. The word used for came down in Aramaic, Hebrew, is yarad, meaning to go down, descend, decline. The same word yarad is used in Genesis 15:11 when birds came down, and I quote, "And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses." So if the same word yarad is used for both God and bird descending, then this verse is simply saying that God simply came down. And if God is in heaven as stated in Revelation 3:12, which in Greek is Uranus, meaning Orion, the sixth star constellation, then He came from an actual place that can be found in astronomy books such as Star Watch by Ben Meyer, pages 26 to 29. And if the saying is true that God holds the world in the palm of His hand, He would not have been able to come down and fit on such a small planet as Earth. Think now and don't say what the Bible does not say, like, this meaning or that meaning, it's just what it says. So this God, in Genesis 11:5 that came down to Earth would indeed have been extraterrestrial according to its definition, which is, extra, a prefix signifying outside, outside the scope or region of, beyond, more than, besides. Terrestrial, pertaining to the Earth, existing on the Earth. This means that anybody or anything that came to Earth that was not originally on the Earth is an extraterrestrial. So according to Genesis 11:5, God is an extraterrestrial, and there are many other accounts that can be found in the Bible regarding extraterrestrial involvement, as well as in the Quran. For instance, 1. The sons of God that came to the daughters of men, Genesis 6:4, agreeable, 6:2, disagreeable. 2. Mysterious clouds, Numbers 10:34, and burning bushes, Exodus 3:4, that spoke. 3. Angels with trumpets, Matthew 24:31, 4. Angels came on errands, Quran 97:4, 5. Muhammad's ascension, Quran 17:1. What you call angels come from heaven up out there somewhere. Some even come in human form in a physical body and can be agreeable, like the Anunnaki referred to in your Bible or Quran as gods or angels, or they can be disagreeable, reptilians referred to as the devil or Iblis and his host. These are just examples, that if taken out of mysticism and brought down to reality, you can see without a doubt, that extraterrestrials have been in your midst, even before the Bible was assembled and can be scientifically proven. So was the flood of Noah considered the end of the world also? It depends on how you want to look at the word world. If you're looking at it as the planet itself, then I'll say no. But if you're looking at it as the inhabitation of the earth, then I'll answer this question by going straight to the Bible in the 7th chapter of Genesis, where many believe is the first destruction of the earth. This chapter narrates the events of the flood that destroyed the earth during Noah's time. It was the end for those of his time. This destruction was the end to all life forms, which is stated in Genesis 7:21, and I quote, "And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man." Note that this verse states, upon the earth, eretz in Aramaic, Hebrew, meaning on, or up and on. So the planet Earth was not destroyed at this time, only the living flesh, that was up on the earth. And therefore, the only end here was, what could be noted as the mass murdering of all living beings. Every man, every animal, and every insect was killed on the face of the earth. As previously mentioned, the meaning of the word earth according to Webster's dictionary, which I never understood why this book was called a dictionary when it is full of definitions. It makes sense to call it a definitionary, right? It says that the earth is, the planet that we live on. So earth would be, the whole, entire planet, not just its inhabitants. Yet, according to Genesis 7:21 it says, all flesh were destroyed on the earth, or as they said, died, which is gawa in Aramaic, Hebrew, meaning, to expire, die, perish. There's a contradiction because Noah, his family, and 2 of every living thing of all flesh that existed at that time, lived, as stated in Genesis 6:19. Now if this verse is saying that all flesh was destroyed upon the earth during the flood, then where did Noah come from, because he and his family and animals would be included in the all, koi in Aramaic, Hebrew, who died? And Webster defines the word all, as, wholly, completely, entirely, considering everything, as a whole, everything. So this definition verifies that Noah should have been included, where it said all flesh died, which is past tense meaning, it already happened. So if Noah and his family were not a part of the all that died, then where were they? Okay, you can say that they all were on the ark, but then the ark couldn't have been on the earth with living people in it because it was still on the earth, which would mean again, they would have been a part of the all flesh that died, as specified in Genesis 7:21. So according to that, Noah couldn't have been on the earth during the flood, or else he would be counted amongst the dead. Now where was this ark? It couldn't have been on the earth. Either this is another contradiction in the Bible, or the ark was actually hovering above the water and not resting up on the earth, or the water that was on the earth. What makes this difficult for you to see is that you were taught and programmed that this ark was some type of boat, and it's written in every version of the Bible, in movies, in novels, etc., that Noah built a big boat. But if you go to the Hebrew language and look at the word they translated as ark, which is the word teba meaning vessel, you will see that the ark being a boat, was only implied. So someone threw the English word ship in, which I've questioned, could be a boat or a craft, and is one of the reasons why the English language is a language of confusion. So either you have to openly admit that the Bible is contradicting itself by saying that all flesh died, which also means Noah and his crew. Or openly admit that Noah, his family and animals were actually hovering over the earth in a craft or vessel. In an article entitled "There is Life on Mars" taken from the winter issue UFO Universe, it states that the Christian belief is that the ark sailed to safety on a distant mountain top, perhaps Mount Arafat. But the legends of many primitive Earth people would have us look elsewhere for the final destination of the ark and its passengers. These legends describe the ark as having the shape of a barrel rather than a ship. When examining Earth legends, perhaps we find that these unspoiled folk tales of primitive Earth people are more accurate than our present sophisticated view of the ark as a ship. What better way for a primitive people to describe a spaceship, which is round and elongated, than like a barrel? It is possible that the ark was not a ship that sailed the seas of Earth, but a spaceship that sailed through space to safety on a distant planet of our solar system? In Genesis 6:14, the Elohim told Noah to construct a craft and they would levitate it. So the end they are referring to during the time of Noah is just talking about the end of all flesh, not the planet itself. As for the end of the planet Earth, it is yet to come. If you go back to the 6th chapter of Genesis, the 5th verse, it reads, "And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." And the 6th verse tells how he felt about the development of this man that he created and his reason for killing all the flesh upon the earth, and I quote, "And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart." Let's just stop here. First of all, this verse is telling you that the all-knowing God, who knows your heart, is stated in Luke 16:15, and I quote, "God, Theos, knoweth your hearts, who knows your thoughts," is stated in Psalm 94:11, and I quote, "The Lord, Yahweh, knoweth the thoughts of man." In fact, according to your Bible, God knows all things, is stated in 1 John 3:20, and I quote, "God, Theos, is greater than our heart, and knoweth all things." Wouldn't an all-knowing God, who knows all things, even down to your very heart, know that man, whom he created, would be evil, raw, disagreeable, and eventually do evil? And if God already knew that man's every imagination would be evil, why should he be grieved, as Zab in Aramaic, Hebrew, meaning to hurt, pain, for something that he knew was going to happen? And why should it repent, Nahum, in Aramaic, Hebrew, meaning to be soni, him, that he made man, Adam in Aramaic, Hebrew, to the point where he would destroy him? And if you were to step out of the scriptures into a court of law, how different would that be to someone convicted of killing their child because he was an incurable dope addict? And then this same man went around killing all of the dope pushers because he was grieved to his heart and felt that these dope pushers would sell dope to children continuously? And how different would that judge be who condemned this man to death who killed these dope pushers? And how different would that be for the person who had to pull the switch that murdered this man, and so on and so on? But that's if you stepped out of the scriptures. Or does this fall under the jurisdiction of a president of a country who can send troops over to a country and mass murder millions of people? It seems that God never said the creation of man was good, or Toby in Aramaic, Hebrew, meaning agreeable anyway, if it's according to Genesis the 1st chapter, when God said, or I should say these gods, because the word God in these verses is translated from Aramaic, Hebrew, which uses the word Elohim, the plural, for the word God. So these Elohim said everything they created was good, until man. 1. Genesis 1:4, and God, Elohim, saw the light, that it was good. 2. Genesis 1:10, and God, Elohim, called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God, Elohim, saw that it was good. 3. Genesis 1:12, and the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself, after his kind, and God, Elohim, saw that it was good. 4. Genesis 1:18, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, and God, Elohim, saw that it was good. 5. Genesis 1:21, and God, Elohim, created great whales, and every living creature that moveth which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind, and God, Elohim, saw that it was good. 6. Genesis 1:25 And God, Elohim, made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God, Elohim, saw that it was good. And in Genesis 1:27 it says, and I quote, So God, Elohim, created man, Adam, in his own image, in the image of God, Elohim, created he him, male, Zakar, and female, Nekabah, created he them. And then the Bible goes on to say in the 28th verse, and I quote, And God, Elohim, blessed them, and God, Elohim, said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it. According to the Bible, God said nothing about the creation of man being good or agreeable as he said with all of his other creations, which would then bring you to another question, which is, if he knew that man was evil, then why did he kill all the animals, the insects, etc., if indeed man only was evil, as stated in Genesis 6:5? No one ever questions this? And remember, according to Genesis 1:21 and 25, the animals were good, from the great whales, and every living creature that moveth under the water, to every winged fowl of the air, to the beast and cattle, down to everything that creepeth upon the earth and anything after their kind. Of course, you might say that animals are not as important as humans beings, and feel that animals are obsolete, that is, until your next meal. However, God himself considered animals a good part of his creation. The flood of Noah was not the first destruction of the planet Earth, it was the fourth. The first destruction was by ice glaciers. The second was 17,250,000 years ago, which was destroyed by a shower of meteorites that hit the earth when the evolution of man and animal occurred from the water from the first living cell that evolved on land. While on land they inherited skin from the dirt, which took billions of years. Early Earth was composed of ammonia and methane gases and water. While these gases were in the water upon the earth, the exposure of ultraviolet rays from the sun caused these gases to form simple, organic molecules which began to form larger molecules, until protein was formed. Eventually this formation ultimately resulted into the prototype of the living cell. The stage after the evolution of the first cell involved the development of the first animals, the single-celled organisms known as protozoa, proto meaning first in time and zoa meaning animals. The next group of animals were the metazoans. The metazoans were composed of tissues, organs, and systems. These animals multiplied and diversified, and over a period of 19 million years evoluted into man and many types of animals. This was the first evolution of life on your planet, then called Chi. These inhabitants went through many changes such as the Ice Age, glaciers, volcanoes, and earthquakes. During this time there was also the problem of dinosaurs. Evolution of the dinosaurs, which means great lizards, and man were imbalanced to the point that the dinosaurs were much bigger than man and were killing them off. The carnivores, meat eaters, were killing off both man and the herbivores, plant eaters. Because of the killings, there were many more dinosaurs than humans, and the dinosaurs ruled. Man lived in constant fear of his predator. So a shower of meteorites was necessary to start a new population, but with smaller animals. Human beings were to be in control in the planet Earth. These meteorites came upon the Earth like great balls of fire. The third meteorite shower which destroyed the planet Earth was 14 million years ago, that led into the reconstruction and replenishing recorded in Genesis of your Bible, and I quote, In the beginning God, Elohim, created the heaven and the earth. In accordance with Matthew 24, the end of the world is a little past near. In fact, it's staring you right in the face. Because if you are judging the end by these signs that are recorded in Matthew 24, they have already happened and are still happening, along with quite a few other things that were left out. When it states in Matthew 24:3, and I quote in part, And what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? Many teachers and preachers use these signs as an indication that the end is near, as stated in Matthew 24:33, where Jesus said, and I quote in part, When ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. The book of Matthew was recorded in 41 AD, after Jesus was thought to have been crucified. So we'll say that these events would occur any time after Matthew was recorded. However, if you read the Old Testament, you will find where nations fought against nations, Ezekiel, chapter 38, kingdoms against kingdoms, Daniel 11:40, famines, Genesis 12:10, pestilence, Ezekiel 6:12, and earthquakes, 1 Kings 19:11, and this was thousands of years before Matthew was recorded. The point I'm making here is that if these were signs that the end was near, then these signs have been happening all along since the first book in your Bible was recorded, which is Genesis, in 1513 BCE, and since the time that the 24th chapter of Matthew was recorded there have been wars, famines, pestilence and earthquakes up until now. Then tell me, according to the Bible, how close is near? Because I'm under the impression that the word near means a short distance in space or time. And if it's a short span of time, then whose time are we in? What about the many millions of people who died waiting because they thought the end was near and that someone would come and save them? Save them from what? Not from all the pain and suffering that they were told they had to endure until the end in Matthew 10:22, and I quote, "But he that endureth to the end shall be saved," because they already lived through that. The word save means to keep safe and sound, to rescue from destruction. And at that point in their lives the only thing that saved them from their suffering was death. And as for the dead, Jesus said in Matthew 22:29 while speaking to the Sadducees, a member of an ancient Jewish party accepting only the written law, and I quote, "Ye do err, not knowing the scriptures, or the power of God," and verses 31 and 32 goes on to say, and I quote, "But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have ye not read that which was spoken unto you by God, saying God is not the God of the dead but of the living?" And the Greek word used in this verse for dead is nekros, meaning one that has breathed his last, lifeless, deceased, departed. So according to this verse, those people who died waiting for the new heaven and the new earth and the coming of Messiah Jesus, as stated in 22nd chapter of Revelation, waited in vain their whole lifetime for something that they thought was so near in accordance to the signs of the end as stated in Matthew 24. I'm not saying that these signs are not true, but they're not giving you the whole picture. What about the droughts, tornadoes, blizzards, meteor showers, ozone depletion, diseases, insects invasion, nature's natural disasters, including earthquakes, that are killing hundreds of people at one turn? And you never stopped for 1 minute to even consider what causes these reactions in nature, because these things have been happening since the beginning of time as you know it, and why in this day and time they are happening so frequently. For instance, earthquakes. In Matthew 24:7 it states earthquakes, in diverse places. Diverse means, different places simultaneously. The United States Geodetic Service tells us that the Earth has as many as 1 million earthquakes taking place annually in various parts of the world. Now, Jesus made this statement before 41 AD, and from the time he predicted fatal earthquakes until the year 1900 AD, only 31 major tremblers took place. Then, from 1900 AD to 1990 AD, 58 major shakes occurred. 31 earthquakes in approximately 1,800 years, and 58 in 90 years, 1900 to 1990. Recent earthquakes in San Francisco, Armenia, Peru, Iran, Russia and Japan bring the total to 64 in 90 years. Of course, with bombs and explosives constantly throwing the earth off balance, you'll find more and more earthquakes happening in other places where they wouldn't have naturally occurred. Most earthquakes occur along two great belts, yet they may occur anywhere on the planet. If a major earthquake hit an area on the eastern seaboard, such as a city like New York, the result would be an enormous catastrophe to building structures. Unlike California, cities in the east do not require buildings to be constructed with earthquake resistance. The way structures are designed can make or break them when an earthquake strikes. Some lessons are learned the hard way. And as the world's catastrophes multiply, they have begun to occur in the least likely of places. In 1990 AD, an earthquake measuring 7.5 on the Richter scale hit Juba, in the southern part of Sudan. 4 weeks after, the area was racked with aftershocks, and it was reported that almost 300,000 people were left homeless. The energy released by a large earthquake can equal up to 180 metric tons of TNT, or 10,000 times the intensity of the first atomic bomb. Earthquakes leave trails of disaster in their wake. With all the constant explosions, nuclear and atomic bombings, how the earth is constantly shifting, which causes more earthquakes to occur. And the worst are the bombs that explode underground and the earth sinks in. You can use the fact that this is one of the predictions of the end, but the truth of the matter is, that man is making a large contribution to its destruction, and there are a number of other added agents that are not recorded in the Bible. For one, droughts. And almost 1/3 of the land on earth is prone to drought, which affects more than 600 million people. During a drought, the soil becomes parched and cracked. The hard-baked surface cannot absorb any water, so very little moisture is retained in the soil. The dry and dusty topsoil is worn away by wind and rain, leaving behind patches of barren land. A drought is a natural disaster that can affect any country in the world. However, its effects are made much worse in the developing world by a number of factors, which include overpopulation, overgrazing, and cutting down trees. Unusually high temperatures can make water sources evaporate very quickly. Combined with a lack of rain, this can lead to droughts in areas that are not normally prone to water shortages. Droughts are frequently caused by natural factors, such as changes in weather patterns. Yet, drought can also result from, or be made worse by, human activities. Trees help to keep soil fertile and to store water. When they are removed, the soil can no longer retain water. It becomes dry and dusty, and soil erosion sets in. As the land is deforested and overgrazed, it turns to desert areas. There are basically three kinds of droughts. 1. Permanent drought characterizes the driest climates. The sparse vegetation is adapted to aridity, and agriculture is impossible without continuous irrigation. 2. Seasonal drought occurs in climates that have well-defined annual rainy and dry seasons. For successful agriculture, planting must be adjusted so that the crops develop during the rainy season. 3. Unpredictable drought involves an abnormal rainfall failure. It may occur almost anywhere but is most characteristic of humid and subhumid climates. Usually brief and irregular, it often affects only a relatively small area. However, there is a fourth kind of drought, an invisible drought which can be recognized in the summer when high temperatures induce high rates of evaporation and transpiration. Even frequent showers may not supply enough water to restore the amount lost. The result is a borderline water deficiency that cuts crop yields. A period of abnormally low rainfall of shorter duration and less severe than a drought is called a dry spell. The universe is so thrown off now that you are not able to determine one season from the other. There were once certain areas on the planet where you've never heard of droughts, earthquakes, hurricanes, etc. occurring. Now there won't be a safe place to live anywhere, especially with the depletion of the ozone layer. Another thing that is not mentioned in the Bible as a sign of the end. When the ultraviolet light from the sun hits the earth, the ozone layer acts as a filter, preventing much of the ultraviolet light from reaching the Earth's surface. The vital gas that is being destroyed is a form of oxygen in which the molecules have 3 atoms instead of the normal 2, and this simple structure is what enables the ozone to absorb ultraviolet radiation. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, along with scientists from several institutions, announced startling findings from atmospheric studies done by a modified spy plane and an orbiting satellite. As the two crafts crossed the northern skies, they discovered record-high concentrations of chlorine monoxide, CIO, a chemical byproduct of the chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, known to be the chief agents of ozone destruction. Since 1974 AD, when Roland and his colleague, Mario Molina first issued the ozone alert, it was known that this chemical had some effect on destroying the ozone. This problem was not easy to fix because CFCs seems to be present in almost every society. Refrigeration, air conditioning, cleaning solvents in factories, blowing agents that create certain kinds of plastic foam. And in many countries CFCs are still expelled into the air as part of aerosol sprays. Fluorocarbons do not react with other chemicals. Instead, they rise to the upper regions of the atmosphere. There, extremely powerful radiation from the sun causes them to break up and release chlorine atoms. Scientists believe the chlorine atoms react chemically and diminish the layer of ozone there. The result of the depletion of the ozone layer can be the ultimate destruction of your planet. And even though issues like these are not recorded in your Bible, your leaders should keep you well informed by warning you of it. Especially since scientists say the ozone layer is going far faster than any of them had predicted. Forget about the future because the threat of the end is here now. You only heard about ground zero in the South Pole, however holes could soon open over heavily populated regions in the Northern Hemisphere. This excerpt was taken from the February 17, 1992 AD issue of Time magazine. The article entitled "The Ozone Vanishes" states, "And not just over the South Pole, a hole in Earth's protective shield could soon open above Russia, Scandinavia, Germany, Britain, Canada and northern New England." So for those who are depending on the Messiah Jesus to come by a certain time, if the ozone layer goes, he just might be a little late. So what is the Christian interpretation of the end of the world? In dealing with the subject of Christianity, it could get quite extensive because it is a religion which is separated into many groups called denominations, which are supposedly the offsets of the original religion, being that they all have one thing in common: Christ. But if you look at the word denomination, it is a combination of 3 words: nations. A prefix signifying separation, cessation, intensification or contraction, also from Latin dis meaning away from, off, as in depile, detrain, down as in depress, decline, wholly, entirely, as in defunct, extinct, dead, undo, reverse the action of, as in defrost. Name. Nation, a staple, historically developed community of people with a territory, economic life, distinctive culture, and language in common. When you refer to a separate group of Christianity as a denomination, this is what you are identifying them as, to reverse the name of a distinct culture of a group of people, which can be seen in the name of the group called Protestants, protest, and the suffix ant, which means a person or thing that protests. So Protestants are the name of a denomination who protests against the religion it originated from. A name which has no basis in Christ or Christianity, as do many of the other Christian denominations. The title Christianity could only have formulated after the birth of Jesus, whom they refer to as Christ, and claim they avidly follow. If you call the people who follow Christ Christians, then what were the people called before Christ was born who followed Moses, Mosians, or Abraham, Abrahamians? Nevertheless, they all seem to have maintained one thing in common, the belief that the coming of Jesus is based on end of the world. Yet, they all have their own interpretations and variations on the events surround his coming, which includes 1. Judgment, 2. Resurrection of the dead, 3. The kingdom, 4. Heaven, 5. Hell, 6. The new heaven and the new earth, and 7. The coming of the Lord that brings history to fulfillment. Preachers, popes, ministers, and elders are bombarded with questions about his coming from their congregations. They've heard all the sermons and stories about the Messiah Jesus coming, and now they want to know, why will he return? Where will he return? How will he return? What events will precede his coming? And who is he coming for? You say the end is here, so where is he? Just as the people questioned in 2 Peter 3:4, and I quote, "People are saying, where is the promise of his coming? Since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation." And the second letter of Peter was recorded in 64 AD. The sad thing is that sincere people in previous generations have mistakenly believed they were living in the last days. Your grandparents used to talk about the coming of Jesus, but he didn't appear in their lifetime. And your parents talked about the coming of Jesus, and he hasn't appeared as yet in their lifetime. You do have some people who profess they are the embodiment of Jesus Christ, like a woman by the name of Maria Devi Christos who lives in Kiev, the first Eastern Slavic city to embrace Christianity, a city in the Soviet Union. Her followers regard her as the living God and come from all parts of the Soviet Union to witness the end of the world with her. This was taken from the November 22, 1993 issue of Maclena's, entitled Kiev's Cult of Doom. Near hysteria grips devotees as they await the end of the world. Her arrival did not bring a new heaven or a new earth. The same old world is still here, full of chaos and turmoil. According to the Bible, no one knows directly or indirectly when the Messiah will come, not the Christians, the Jews, nor the Mohammedans. The problem is that Jesus coming again was gravely misunderstood. First, Jesus said in John 14:2, and I quote, "In my Father's house is many mansions, I go to prepare a place for you." So he's been preparing that place, the holy city, for 2,000 years? In John 16:16 Jesus tells his disciples, and I quote, "In a little while, and ye shall not see me, and again, a little while, and ye shall see me, and, because I go to the Father?" When Jesus made this statement to his disciples, they were confused and didn't know what he meant, because in the next verse they say to each other, "Then said some of his disciples among themselves, What is this that he saith unto us, a little while, and ye shall not see me, and again, a little while, and ye shall see me, and because I go to the Father?" So Jesus' followers were confused in the very beginning about his return. Now let's go on to the 21st and 22nd verse, where Jesus explains himself, and I quote, "A woman when she is in travail hath sorrow, because her hour is come. But as soon as she is delivered of the child, she remembereth no more the anguish for joy that a man is born into the world. And ye now therefore have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and your joy no man taketh from you." Jesus never explained the statement that he made. He only told his disciples that they would be glad to see him when they saw him again. So they didn't know what he was talking about, because they didn't know about any resurrection. They certainly had no idea about him returning 2,000 years later, because he said in a little while they would see him again. Now, go back to the 10th verse and you'll find yet another contradiction in the Bible when Jesus said he wouldn't see them anymore, and I quote, "Of righteousness, because I go to my Father, and ye see me no more." However, you've just read in verse 16 Jesus said that he would see them in a little while. So the disciples apparently carried to their graves that Jesus' return was at hand, or they were confused. And if Jesus' disciples were confused about the very statement Jesus made of his return right out of his own mouth, how can Christians reading the same statement understand? Yet, people 2,000 years later have constructed elaborate, and often make wild eschatologies, a Greek word meaning studies of last things, of how they interpreted Jesus' return. The return Jesus was talking about was after his so-called crucifixion, when he would see them again in Mark 16:14, and I quote in part, "Afterward he appeared unto the 11 as they sat at meat." So the earliest Christians misinterpreted Jesus' return as stated in 2 Thessalonians 2:2, and I quote, "That ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand." For some time Christians continued to look for Christ to set up a literal kingdom of God on earth. And in the 3rd century, they claimed that the kingdom existed not in time or space but in the believer's soul. By the 5th century, Christianity was the Roman Empire's official religion, who rejected the doctrine of the millennium, the period of 1,000 years during which some believe Christ will reign on earth with everyone. Since then people were always on the watch for the signs which, according to the prophetic tradition, would herald and accompany the final time of troubles, bad rulers, civil discord, war, drought, famine, plague, comets, sudden deaths of prominent persons, and there was never any difficulty in finding them. Popes, Muslims, and Jews were often associated with the Antichrist, and as 1000 AD approached, teachers predicted that the world was about to end and that Jesus Christ would appear. Many in the army of pilgrims sold their belongings and headed to Jerusalem to await Christ. Terror filled them at every storm, comet and other event of nature. They fell to their knees at every crack of thunder, expecting the earth to open and give up its dead. Every meteor over Jerusalem brought Christians into the streets to cry and pray. And Christians today still yearn more than ever for Jesus to come and straighten out the mess. As Christians, the Islamic faith is also divided into many different groups called sects who have their own interpretations of the end. A sect is a group of people having a common leadership, set of opinions, philosophical doctrine, etc. Of course this definition does not apply because, if they had a common leader, set of opinions and philosophical doctrine they wouldn't be divided, especially not into over 1000 sects. They will say that there are only 73 known sects, but they are very much aware of all the other sects who they refuse to acknowledge, like the Nation of Islam which also has sects that branched from it such as 5%. Then you have the Wahhabi, the Ahmadiyya, the Shia, the Sunni, the Hanafiya, the Safiya, the Malakiya, the Hanabaliya, the Ansar Sunnah, Ikhwani Muslimin, African Muslim, Qadmiya, Tajani, Sufis who all have their own sects, even the Christian sect of Muslims, and the list goes on and on. Let me ask all of you Muslims this, if the Quran 6-159 says that, and I quote, "As for those who divide their religion and break up into sects, thou hast no part in them in the least, their affair is with Allah, He will in the end tell them the truth of all that they did." Then how is it that you all say you believe and follow the Quran and broke up into sects, when Allah says that He will have nothing to do with you? And you can't use any hadith, tales, about Muhammad to verify this, either. According to this verse, every Muslim who is not of the original school of thought that Muhammad followed is blatantly defying Allah. And guess what? Muhammad followed Jesus, because Jesus sent him, and Muslims use this quote in John 16:7 to substantiate that claim. The Quran dedicates whole chapters to Jesus and his mother, such as the 19th chapter of the Quran, Surat al-Maryam, and the Quran raised Jesus above the prophets in Quran 2-253. And in fact Jesus is mentioned more times by name and titles than Muhammad. So if Muhammad undoubtedly followed Jesus, then he would also be considered a Christian. And if Islam is a branch of Christianity, then this quote applies to the entire Islamic religion. There is no difference when Christians use denominations or when Muslims use sects. There is no difference in the fact that each one separated from something else, to follow their own doctrine, based on their original religion. They use the same separations in referring to their scriptures. The Muslims will say, different translations of the Quran, Abdullah Yusuf Ali, T.B. Irving, Dr. M.M. Khatib, Gary Miller, Rashad Khalifa, Sir Mir Ahmed Ali, Tariq Tarsal Inc., Malik Ghulam Farid, Marmaduke, Pickthall etc., and the Christians will say, different versions of the Bible. Lindisfarne Gospels, Erasmus, John Wycliffe, Millis Coverdale, the Great Bible, the Geneva Bible, the Bishop's Bible, the Dewey Reams Bible, King James, Authorized, Revised, Revised Standard, Jerusalem Bible, New English Bible, Good News Bible, New International. The Quran was translated from Ashuric Syriac, Arabic, and the Bible was translated from Aramaic, Hebrew, in the Old Testament, and the New Testament from Greek. All of these Qurans and Bibles were translations. And all of these Qurans and Bibles are each person's own version, otherwise there would just be one of each that was reprinted and dispersed. How do Muslims interpret the end of the world? They don't. Their whole concept of the end of the world is based on Judgment Day. The day every man will have to pay for his sins committed during his lifetime. In fact, they have incorporated quite a few terms to signify that day. However, most are not mentioned in the Quran. 1. Yawm al-Din, Day of Judgment, Quran 1-4. 2. Yawm al-Akhir, the Last Day. A name given in the Quran to the Day of Judgment. 3. Yawmu al-Fasi, the Day of Serving, the Day of Judgment, Quran 37:21. 4. Yawmu al-Hashr, Day of Assembly, the Day of Judgment. 5. Yawmu al-Hisab, Day of Reckoning, the Day of Judgment, Quran 38:16. 6. Yawm al-Jam, Day of Gathering, the Day of Judgment. 7. Yawm al-Khulud, Day of Eternity. 8. Yawm al-Khuruj, the Day of Exodus, the Day of Judgment. 9. Yawm al-Qiyamah, Day of Standing, the Day of Resurrection, Quran 75:1. 10. Yawm al-Waid, the day of threatenings. The day of judgment. 11. Yawm el-Matumun, a known day, known to God. The day of judgment. 12. Yawm el-Tagabun, day of mutual deceit, the day of judgment. Al-Balzawi says, both the righteous and the wicked will disappoint each other by reversing their positions, the wicked being punished, while the righteous are in bliss. 13. Yawm el-Talaq, day of meeting, the day of judgment. 14. Yawm el-Tanad, a day of mutual outcry, a name given to the day of judgment in the Quran. 15. Yawmu el-Baith, day of awakening, Quran 30:56. 16. Yawmu el-Mahid, the encompassing day, Quran 11:84. 17. Al-Sa, the hour, Quran 6:31. As you know, Muslims, Mohammedans, or whatever they choose to call themselves, each have their own hadiths, or stories, of the life and times of Muhammad, what he said and did, and of course, each knowing what he really meant. However, they all do have one common interest, and that is Muhammad being a prophet. So with this in mind, they have accumulated many different terms, as previously stated, denoting the end of the world, which they call the last day, the day of judgment, or the resurrection. And you'll find that almost every chapter in the Quran refers to the day of judgment, which Quran 70:4 says last for 50,000 years, and I quote, "The angels and the Spirit ascend unto him in a day, the measure whereof is, as, 50,000 years, but if you go to Quran 32:5 it says 1,000 years, and I quote, he rules, all, affairs from the heavens to the earth, in the end will, all affairs, go up to him, on a day, the space whereof will be, as, 1,000 years of your reckoning." This is an obvious contradiction when, according to Quran 2:2, is supposed to make all things clear and with no doubt in it. And every devout Muslim who reads their Quran doesn't even realize, nor are they concerned, that according to their interpretation, there is no end after the day of judgment. Muslims are very narrow-minded and can only see things one way, and they will go on and on for centuries down that same narrow path and keep falling off and never stop once to wonder why. They are the ones who are deaf, dumb and blind, Quran 2:18. And right now the world is falling apart right in front of their eyes and they don't see it. This is the Muslims' interpretation of the end of the world. After judgment, the decision, which they call the day of reckoning, Yawmu el-Hisab, is the sentencing, a specified punishment, called the day of standing, Yawm el-Qiyamah. And after death penalty, referred to as the last day, then you have life after death, the resurrection, Yawm el-Akhir. So as far as Muslims are concerned, there is no end for them. There is one sect, however, who went as far as predicting the time the world will end is in the year 2280 AD using the number 19. When in Quran 31:34 it states, "Verily the knowledge of the hour is with God alone." But little do they know the end is more than a judgment. And it does have to do with man's actions, because it's man's actions that is aiding in its destruction. A destruction in which no mortal, in no sight, will be able to resurrect from. All of life's basic components are being destroyed, the air, the water, and the land. There is a steady buildup of carbon dioxide in the air, the water, and the land. There is a steady buildup of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere from the bunting of fossil fuel, coal and oil that has occurred since the Industrial Revolution began. Higher levels of this colorless, odorless gas tend to warm up the planet by the so-called greenhouse effect, holding in the infrared radiation heat that would otherwise escape into space. All sorts of organizations are finally coming to light and realize the fate of this planet. The World Meteorological Organization reported that pollution of the atmosphere is depleting the ozone layer, and the increased radiation is linked with the increase of cancer of the skin. The Department of Agriculture cites acid rain as another potential killer, which results from the burning of fossil fuels with high sulfur content, especially local. Polluting particles and gases are spread by the wind and return to the earth with the rain in the form of sulfuric and nitric acids that directly endanger the life of fish, animals, and vegetation. Besides, in the soil, acid rain can liberate poisonous metals. These metals may find their way into rivers and lakes and thus become a health hazard. In a medical survey, Sao Paulo said that next to smoking, air pollution is mainly responsible for diseases of the respiratory organs and the second cause of death. According to the UN report, many cancers are related to the air people breathe or the water they drink, to the environment in which they work or live, to their personal diet or way of life. And without water and air, there is no human life. But how safe is our air and our drinking water? How safe are the rivers and oceans? How safe is the air you breathe? By the destructive pollution caused by oil spills, chemical and nuclear wastes. In 1986, in Chernobyl, a nuclear plant melted down and large populated areas surrounding the reactor site were contaminated. 4 years later, Ukraine and nearby Belarusia remain contaminated with high levels of radioactivity. The poisoning of the land has created dire health problems causing deformities in humans and animals, and economic devastation. Soon a drop of water will cost more than a drop of oil. Why? Between 30% and 40% of the world's food production is now dependent on irrigation. Industry is also using ever-increasing amounts of water to generate electricity, to cool nuclear reactors and manufacture chemicals and metals. As a result, many lakes and streams have been so badly polluted by agriculture and industry, as well as by the wastes from the increasing numbers of humans, that they have become unusable without expensive treatment. Despite purification measures, the need to take drinking water from contaminated sources has caused widespread disease. For example, every year factories dump millions of tons of wastewater containing zinc, mercury, tungsten, molybdenum, and other poisonous substances into streams, lakes, rivers, and seas, despite dozens of official resolutions, decrees, proclamations, and promises. Nowhere has the link between the misuse of the land and filthy water been manifested more clearly than in Central Asia. There, a combination of unfiltered drinking water, untreated sewage, and large quantities of pestilence, herbicides, defoliants, and fertilizers has done massive damage to the population's health, not to mention causing severe economic losses. For decades, pure water from the region's rivers has been diverted to irrigation projects, and the water remaining in rivers and streams is almost always badly polluted. The World Health Organization estimates that as much as 80% of the world's cases of disease are traceable to unclean air. This is not a chilling revelation, it's fact. Growing use of pesticides, herbicides and fungicides will soon put agricultural production itself in jeopardy. And why the excessive use? Only to obtain monetary and immediate advantages from the land. At a conference in Nairobi, Africa, it was noted that deserts are spreading in many parts of the earth. An environmentalist concluded the causes are primitive deforestation, fire, erosion, inadequate agricultural forms and pesticides, join the natural causes to accelerate the desertification process. Right now Brazil has everything to form one of the largest deserts in the world within the next 25 to 30 years if it continues to occupy the Amazon area in a disorganized manner. Thanks largely to man's own senselessness, desertification now threatens the fragile existence of about 630 million people who dwell in these regions. With this, countries could disappear from the face of the map. At this point the efforts made by small organizations are not enough to remove the threats to man's well-being, and calls for international collaboration on a scale not seen so far in man's history, to save the environment from this irreparable damage. There are an extreme amount of obstacles that would have to be eliminated. To begin with, traditional lifestyles will have to change. Then, national and racial pride and prejudices, open hostilities, social injustices, have to be put aside because they clearly stand in the way of unification and getting anything done. It's man's greed and oftentimes ignorance, his short-sightedness and outright malice, that opposes making progress. It is exactly that which has led the world to the present-day problems. Man himself has created his own situation, and this includes you and anyone else who is attributed to this problem. You'll say I don't smoke, but you may drive a car, or use hairspray, or other things that you now know aggravates an already enormous problem. So now you know for a fact that the world is most definitely coming to an end. Whether by flood, fire, freezing, cosmic collision or other catastrophic manifestations, it's inevitable. Now whether someone will come and take you out of the predicament you've gotten yourselves into is another question. Right now your problem is with nature and you don't have to worry about Star Wars or the climate to kill you. Mother Nature will do her part. For century after century you have totally abused and taken advantage of her, and now she's mad and wants you off her back, and you think that by adding trees here and preserving things there, that it will reverse the process. Not this time. Everything you human beings want seems to go against nature or the natural order of things. For instance, you will take food that is grown in one region and take it to another region where it doesn't belong. You'll take something like oranges from Florida, which is a tropical fruit, and grow them in Georgia. That alters the ground and it alters the atmosphere. And the same thing is done with insects, animals, fish, and even people. You'll take a wild lion from the jungle and bring him to a city and put him in a cage. Altering things like these alters the natural order of things. And then when nature starts to react by causing what you call natural disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, etc., you don't understand why. Your problem is you think that you are the only species of importance because you have a little more intelligence. However, you're not. Just as you can take advantage of cows, pigs, chickens, deers, sheep, fish, etc., and use them for food, clothing or whatever. Believe me, someone more intelligent than you is looking at you the same way. What man doesn't understand is that everything that exists has life, from the plaque on your teeth to germs that you wash away every time you take a bath. All of this has life and some with more intelligence than you. Look at all the incurable diseases like AIDS and cancer. These diseases are live organisms that are spreading fast, and right now there is not a thing you can do about it. So I would say that this life substance that is feeding off of you, the same way you do with all of the weaker species, have outwitted all of the scientists in the world who can't find a cure, and you call it negative. Look at it this way, you are actually producing chemicals in toothpaste to kill bacteria and plaque. But do you really know why plaque exists, or do you question the being who made plaque? Therefore you are destroying life because you have to keep your mouth clean. It's not what is good for you but what you want that is more comfortable or convenient for you that's causing your destruction and killing everything else around you. Now you have to pay the price. The end of the world has nothing to do with religion, but it does have to do with you and what you do from this point on. Do you really think that Jesus, or the Messiah, or whoever you are waiting on is coming for you or anybody else with the world and the state it's in? And you haven't changed. You still want any and everything that makes life more convenient, which if the Messiah was to come with a new world, a new Jerusalem, it would eventually end up the same way because it happened before. And each time they try, it ends up even worse than before. So now what are you going to do? The scientists came up with 3 alternatives because they knew that the earth was headed for destruction. 1. Mass genocide, starts wars that kill millions of people, another way of population control. 2. Go underground, they couldn't use that because when they were going underground, there were other beings in caverns because they knew whatever was going to happen would only affect the surface. 3. Get the hell out of there, and that's why they have bases on Mars and Moon and they are only moving select people there. The point I'm making here is that what's happening to the earth has nothing to do with your race, your religion, or your status because it affects everyone living on it. So instead of everyone focusing on trivial things like what am I going to wear tomorrow, they had better worry about whether or not there is going to be a tomorrow and what they are going to do to survive until or through the end.